Hi everyone, my name is Tina Palajic. I'm gonna be your host today. I'm a museum curator and the national coordinator of the EU project Taking Care, Ethnographic and World Cultures Museums as Spaces of Care here in the Slovene Ethnographic Museum. Welcome to the third event in the series of events organized together with Kanika Gupta as a pre-program of her residency that will take place hopefully this summer at the Slovene Ethnographic Museum. So the museum is one of the 13 European museums that are part of the Taking Care project, led by the Weltmuseum in Vienna and co-funded by the Creative Europe program of the European Union. The focus of the project is on climate change on the one hand, and on the other, on the non-European collections, or with other words, world cultures collections. We try through different activities, explore those collections in order to find knowledges or practices that might serve as an inspiration for rethinking our future in more sustainable manner. For that purpose, we've also invited art historian Kanika Gupta to be our activist in residence. Kanika holds a PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi, New Delhi, on the ancient Indian motif, the female and the tree. She also has several other talents. For instance, she is also a trained dancer and has experience in filmmaking. She was invited as an expert in Indian art and material culture to work with the museum Indian collection. In addition to this work with museum collection, Kanika has also been requested to think together with us about how to communicate the heritage with our audience in new and innovative ways, and to engage as many people as possible in conversations around environment, ecological devastation, sustainability, and so on. And one of the outcomes so far has been Kanika's documentary film that brings the story of a house that has lost its garden, trees, green areas, in exchange for cement and concrete. So I would like to thank you all for joining us today for the pre-screening of this event, for the pre-screening of this film entitled It Was in Spring. Before I explain how the screening will be done, I would like to give a word to Kanika for a short introduction of a film. Kanika, the word is yours.
Thank you so much, Tina. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really have to thank the Ethnographic Museum of Ljubljana in Slovenia for not just sponsoring but also hosting this screening. And thank you, Tina, for the introduction and introducing the film so beautifully. So this film is a very personal film. It's shot in the house that once belonged to me, the house that I was born in as a child. And to see it let go, to see it come down was an extremely traumatic experience for me. And when this was happening, it was a very extempore reaction from my end to suddenly pick up the camera and shoot what was happening. When I began shooting, now what is this film? I never knew what is it that I would do with the footage. And somewhere after these couple of months of shooting, I realized that one day I would like to put this footage together, edit it, and put it across to the world and make it into a proper structured film. And that is the day when I started shooting with a certain idea in my mind. Before that, it was simply an extremely emotional reaction. And then, yes, this footage was shot for more than 4 years ago, and it has been shot for over a year. So I have shot certain parts of this film over 1.5 years. And what made me think about this film structure as you see it today is the Indian painting tradition. So I started thinking about the Indian Baramasa paintings. These are Indian sets of paintings which represent each month as a distinct season. Then they will talk about symbolism, which will communicate certain aspects of that month to you, or the kind of weather that a certain part in India would witness, depending on where the set is made. They would communicate it to you through festivities that might happen in this month, or through the temperature, through how lovers behave to each other. So, at a very human level, at a very emotional level, and also they will give you a lot of symbolism which deals with fertility, agriculture, or trade, or all other economic practices that would happen within that specific year, time of the year. So I took inspiration from this whole idea of depicting the last seasons that this house would witness before it was brought down. And therefore, I am personally very, very attached to the rains. In India, we have an extremely hot summer, and when it rains in India, it really calls for celebration. So, rain is something which I personally am very close to. So, what I tried to do was to shoot an entire year that the house witnesses along with its people, and the way it experiences the last seasons, the last uh, rains, the last summer, the last winter, the last flowers that it witnesses. And that is what I've captured in the footage. And that is what I am today attempting to share with you. The film is not about simply that a house comes down. It is more about sharing feelings, about sharing these emotions and relating to nature, relating to trees and flowers and what we've grown up with in a certain way. So yeah, I hope you all will enjoy it, and I will really look forward to your comments, interaction, and feedback on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kanika, so much for this brief introduction. I will share the link in the chat box now. That means that we will watch the film individually, each on our own computer. So please follow the link that is in the chat box now, which will take you to the Slovene Ethnographic Museum YouTube channel. And you will be able to access it there and watch it there. I will be available here all the time for you. If you face any problems, please don't hesitate to contact me, to write me here in the chat box, and we'll try to solve the problem if there is any. I would also like to kindly ask you to stay on Zoom, so don't leave us, stay on Zoom, just turn off your microphones and camera. After the film, which is 30 minutes long, we will meet here again for the short conversation. So please come back to share your impressions, your thoughts, your ideas with us. So now let's enjoy the film. Thank you so much for sharing this very personal film with us. I have to say that I watched it yesterday and maybe 3 or 4 times before that, and also today. And each time I see it, there is something new I notice. It speaks on so many different levels, and I would really love to have a discussion about it in the
Thank you so much.
few
Thank
minutes.
you so much.
Just really happy that we have the first message in our chat box. Lele Huang is saying, what is the dance about you danced in the beginning? What is the ritual, religious meaning of the tree leaf placed in front of the image of Ganesh?
Right. So yeah, so the first question, the performance that you saw in the beginning, this part of the film, this small footage was not really shot during the entire shooting of the film. So this is a rehearsal shot from way back. This is almost 9 to 10 years old. And I was practicing for a stage performance on Durga. So this was supposed to be something like a Durga ballet. And I was supposed to be dancing in it. So that was a small clipping from my rehearsal. So that was what you saw in the beginning. And for the leaf, that is a betel leaf, what we call pan in India. And a betel leaf is considered auspicious in some parts of India. And during the festival of Diwali, in one of the rituals, it is stuck to the photograph of uh, the goddess Lakshmi, as you saw in this case. Or otherwise, it is also given to a deity in the sense that you can put it on the terracotta image of a deity. So it's part of a ritual during Diwali.
Can you maybe write it down, the name of the leaf in the chat box, so that
Yes.
everyone interested can find it?
It's a betel leaf, very, very popular in India. It's called the pan. We have it's a very popular culture in especially a place called Banaras. So the pan of Banaras is a very popular thing in India. But the leaf essentially is ritualistically important in the ritual that you saw.
Mm-hmm. You can also turn your mics on and speak directly to Kanika if you like. If,
can I ask? I have several questions, but maybe, okay, no, instead of typing them, I would like, it would be nice to know a bit more about the context. Why? Because it's not directly seen from the film, actually the reasons why the house is getting reconstructing, who is deciding about it, and who will use it later, because now obviously one family, including yourself, is living inside, and why actually this decision to renovate it in such a dramatic way, not in a more modest, and also who decides about it, because obviously you are against it, and then obviously there are some more senior male personalities that would decide about it. So it's about the position maybe also of the woman inside of the family. So this is one question. Shall I put another, or shall I wait for later?
Shall I answer this first, Tina?
Okay.
What do you
Yeah.
think?
yes.
Yeah. So yes, yeah, it is a lot of complexity within the family structure that is reflected in the film. But why is it being reconstructed? I think one of the biggest reason is that people today in urban spaces across Indian cities are bringing down a first floor or a single floored building and trying to reconstruct many floors in place of that. And that simply is for the economic aspect of it. So if you have a house which only has a single floor, it doesn't have a first floor or it doesn't have a second floor. So if you reconstruct it in a certain way to cover more area where you may have had a garden in the past, so if you cover a larger square meter of space, and so obviously you are able to give more room to the other floors as well, because now you are thinking in multi-story, you're not thinking on a single floor anymore. And therefore you also need still parking, and you obviously each family is going to have at least one car. So and in India it's very, I wouldn't say tragic, but then it's a fact that each family, even if there are four members in a family, they tend to have more than one car. So sometimes they might have three cars for four people, which is crazy, because the amount of traffic that we have is obviously not going to decrease like this. So which is why I think this is one of the very big reasons why there is a trend in urban spaces in India to completely do away with plantation. And even if one is thinking of three floors over a single bungalow sort of a structure, one sort of either is forced to do away with the garden and make a still parking or cement the entire region, or you want to increase your area coverage per square meter to be able to then give it on rent or make it more profitable or to be able to fetch more money out of it. Yes, I think it really has a lot to do with the financial and economic conditions that the people would be in. Some would want to perhaps do it because they do not have any second source of income, so on and so forth. So there are many, many factors which influence. But I think the worst thing to happen is that in many, many cases, at least certain alternatives are available. But what is happening is that people don't want to consider these alternatives. And why? Because it's becoming fashionable. It's becoming a trend to, not have plantation anymore because it's of no use. So what I've tried to speak in this film is primarily the fact that we are we are encouraging a trend where we really are contributing to what we keep cribbing about every single day, especially in India. Oh, it's so polluted, there's so much of pollution, or there's so much of noise, or there's so much of whatever. So I think this trend, which is really, really spreading fast, it has consumed a lot of urban spaces, including the place I come from. I grew up in, that is Delhi. I have witnessed a lot of parks and spaces completely get covered up in cement, and then have a lot more construction. Whereas it was possible to leave a certain amount of space for plantation and then make a multi-story. So that those alternatives are not being looked at because they're just not being considered important. They're not being seen as part of their newly found luxury anymore. I think that is the problem that I'm trying to address here. Yeah, and the family structure, yes, it was a difficult decision within the family to be able to do this. And yes, it's also obviously it will be different when it comes to different members of the family. Some will have a more emotional reaction to something like this, whereas some other person might not have that emotional attachment at all. Yeah.
Sarah, we cannot hear you.
You are on mute. If you could.
Just one clarification, because I want to leave space for others and leave the other question maybe for later. But just one clarification. So then this is for the purpose of the same family. This is of course, the family house, and then the same family will live, but because the family increases and the space is very expensive, then it's needed to go into the height, no, to make
Yes.
more. Okay,
Yes,
I just
that's
wanted
right.
to clarify.
So this was essentially only a single bungalow sort of a structure, which with no second floor. So when you see the terrace, it's completely, it's all empty and open, and it was now a huge terrace, which is unimaginable today. Very, very difficult to get.
Yeah,
so now it's not more. We have 4 floors now in the same building.
Yeah, it's about this urbanization trends now everywhere happening. It's one aspect of it, how the urban space is getting more used by the building because it's so expensive. And here is from the perspective of a middle class family how to solve this problem, because there are many other perspectives as well. I have one question maybe for later as well, so I would leave.
Yeah, so I think no, you can also, I don't know, yeah, maybe you can ask later or now, whichever you're comfortable. Yeah. So I think the problem is also that we keep introducing this whole idea of security glass, and we are told that you must air condition the house. The trend of natural air or natural light seeping into the household is not being encouraged. So the roof, the height of the roof is also decreased. And you're not given space to put traditional coolers, the Indian coolers, which, okay, they consume electricity, but much less, and they are a lot more ecologically better. They do not produce these different chlorofluorocarbons and gases. So coolers have always existed. Of course, at one time in the Indian summer, they also become very difficult to use, but it's definitely possible to use them. And then the current architectural tradition, the architectural style in modern India, in urban spaces, is completely discouraging the use of these coolers. You are told that if you're able to buy luxury, you should be putting an air condition. You don't need coolers. Therefore, the whole structure of the house changes. You don't have windows anymore in a lot of modern houses. You're just given a security glass because you don't need a cooler. So you can't open a window. You can just open a door. I think the whole architecture is being influenced by this new idea of luxury, which is very, very fake. It is capitalistic, and we need to see through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Sarah, you can ask another question. Don't worry.
Yeah, because it's a whole this trend, happening in basically all over the world, in many aspects of putting this urban space getting so expensive and then making less and less place for any kind of natural things, but to put these other structures. But I think it is also, it is very interesting for me that it is addressed, of course, it is addressed from the perspective of the middle class, and then you see those kids which are obviously from another class, and then it opens the question other people that are dealing with the same trend in very different way, because they don't have this possibility of any kind of luxury. So we can see the kitchen of this family inside of this house to make chapati, you know, and the kids that are all covered with dust and so on. So I don't know. I mean, it's of course impossible to address all these issues, but it's a bit dangerous in the film to, I mean, it's good because it opens the perspective of other people, but it's also a bit slippery because it gives kind of, you know, this a bit spoiled middle class perspective, you know, and this I just wanted to point this out, that this class issue actually, because one needs to have the possibility to afford this, and it needs to take the responsibility as you want to address to keep the place for the nature and for the ecology, but there is this class issue is very much jumping in a way, at least for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's very important that we address it, which is why it's no point that I hide it. I think this is, I didn't want to hide any part of it, which would have been, I think, more unfair. And yes, so my idea was not to put them away somewhere because, you know, it becomes more difficult. But yes, so I've tried to in the end, especially the part that you spoke of, I've tried to create that parallel that, you know, here is one kitchen which is temporary. Of course, these workers are here temporarily and then they will move on, and then there is another kitchen, and there is these two kitchens, the parallel that you also talked about. But then I'm also addressing the fact that there is an aspirational quality. So even if, yes, we have a lot of class problem, but we also have caste issues. So that can also be brought in, because in the context of India, caste really takes over class. That is one aspect of it. And then, yes, the kitchen, the two parallels in the kitchen also bring about this wrong aspirational sense that we all are falling for, whichever class we might be, or even if somebody comes from a more cleaner rural space which has a different kitchen practice. In fact, I have always tried to look for an Indian kitchen reconstruction, but then there are very few architects in India who want to create a quote unquote modern Indian house with an Indian kitchen. They all want to go and it doesn't depend who is getting this new kitchen made. Even if this person comes from a certain rural quote unquote background, even that person will have a different aspirational value and will opt for something which looks, you know, European, American, Western, and therefore better. So that aspirational value, in fact, I would like to challenge, but not so directly and politically. But yes, I have always tried to look for an Indian kitchen setup for my own for my own living space also. Yeah.
I would also like to ask a question related to what Sarah, you just brought up. So if there is a middle class who is privileged to do such construction, let's say, and to change the environment, are there any, let's say, like, is there a civil society who tries to change this? Are there any initiatives, movements from the society, from I don't know, from the middle class, or some other also?
Yeah, so I think not in terms of questioning the construction techniques and methods in urban spaces, but yes, as part of an ecological movement or environmental issues, there are several groups, several people who talk about it, and the most famous, or I mean, she's also questioned in a certain way, is Arundhati Roy. So she's been constantly speaking about a lot of such issues. We also have the Narmada Bachao Andolan, for instance. So these are just, I'm picking up examples of very large, wide movements which have tried to address the issues of construction of dams and the kind of modernity we want, and what is it that we are opting for, what kind of aspirations do a common Indian, middle class Indian, or whatever, some different castes or classes have. So yeah, there are many, many people who are trying to question this. And I think in terms of a political movement, I could say the most important would be definitely, one is Narmada Bachao Andolan, of which Medha Patkar, a socialist, has been very, very strongly been part of. And then we could also, I mean, name the Chipko movement, which became very popular in India. And the originator of this movement, one of the fountainheads, in fact, we lost him just a few days back. Sundarlal, I think it was his name. Yeah, Sundarlal Bahugun. Yeah. So he was one of the person who spearheaded this movement, and I think this movement really spread among the people because it was the people who had to go and hug the trees before they were being cut, and they would refuse to let go of the tree. And in fact, women and children seem to have played a very important aspect in that. So yeah, politically there is, but then unfortunately in urban spaces, I could not really find a lot of artworks or a lot of people who want to at least talk about it. So it gets very difficult. We can talk about, we have people talking about the larger issues, but it's a very seemingly small change. When we see it in a film, or just a small garden washed away, it might not sound as a very big problem, but then it's a constant trend. And when this trend takes over a huge region of, let's say, the national capital region, the whole of NCR, then it is going to change not just the landscape of the city, but everything, the soil quality, air quality. It's just going to worsen to a degree where you just cannot do anything about it. And I think T.M. Krishna, I think I mentioned in one of my previous lectures also, has spoken something similar for the city of Chennai in one of his interviews. So T.M. Krishna is again one artist who's also addressing similar issues, but in, of course, a different way.
We have a comment in a chat box by Manas Chabra. Do you want to speak? Yes. Okay.
Okay, thank you. It was really great to see the movie. I particularly like the perspective where there is a house that is being built for a family by another laborer family, and you can see the kids around. Although it's not technically would be very safe for them to be there on a construction site, but it tells a lot. It tells us a lot about the workers' condition where. Kids and the family of the laborer is also there helping them, and as we can see in corona times also, these only these laborers have to go back, and this is very nicely shown in the picture. And also very very soft or very delicately put point of view where the garden of the house is gone away, and it's been shown in the film. So it's very the topic is very interesting, and I really liked how it's been shot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. There is also another comment from Aditya. Do you want to speak directly to Kanika yourself, or should I read it? Let me see if...
Yeah, are you guys able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Yeah, so a great documentary, Kanika. I really love the parts which were still and silent and with all the poetry which was there. So I just had an observation that I had while I was watching especially the Lakshmi Puja during Diwali. So like basically what I was thinking was that with the reduction of green spaces in our cities and our homes, even the gods, even the plant gods or goddesses we used to worship in our country, like Tulsi or Neem, the ones which I can remember from my childhood, that has also considerably decreased. So like maybe, I don't know, that might be a specific thing, but it can be something of like we are like holding plants sacred to us, having that religious aspect to it. That also has gone down quite a bit with the increase in urbanization. Or do you think that is more of a specific thing rather than being generic?
Yeah, no, I really think that is an excellent observation. In fact, in my previous lecture, I've tried to address something very similar, that there are trees as deities, tree gods, tree goddesses, which have existed in a much, much larger number in ancient India, and they were
Yeah.
respected and treated as part of a ritual in a much more stronger way. And today it has decreased tremendously over the past whatever number of years. And yes, as I think you are correctly observing, it is again on a decline. I mean, initially, of course, every house would have a tulsi. Every house, of course, I'm being very generic here, but we would generally have this trend that a lot of families would keep plants and certain shrubs in their houses. But today there is no space. Either there is no space or it is just being completely done away with because it's not
Yeah.
considered significant anymore. And it is a reflection of how we are leading our lives today. Clearly, there is no doubt about it.
Yeah. Okay.
The problem is that we've shifted our focus from nature to something else. And I think the biggest issue is that we are trying to look for luxury in something other than nature, in something not
Mm.
so something inside, something which brings us inside cemented closed walls, which has some artificial air conditioning, something to do with machinery. I think we're looking at luxury for luxury at the wrong spaces.
Okay.
Okay, I would like to go a little bit back to the film, Kanika, if I may, and I would like to speak about the sound because today I was again struck by the by different sounds that we could listen in your film. How did you think about the sound? I mean, was this were them all original, or did you create them after your filming? And also another question, was the sound important for your message? Did you think about the message that can be delivered through the sound?
Yeah, we really, really worked on the sound. So I'm extremely happy that my editor is also here. I'll also request him to come up and speak a little about it. But yes, sound is extremely important in my other work in general and especially in this film. And yes, we have used a lot of sounds from outside in the sense it is not the real sound of the footage in many cases. But then we've also kept a lot of original sound. So, for instance, the sound of the crackers bursting, we really could not replace that with an artificial or a second sound because it had a lot of synchronization with what we were doing. And then I wanted to shift shots in a certain way, and the sound would just not sync otherwise. Or, for that matter, the construction sound. I didn't want to, get an artificial construction sound or record it somewhere else and superimpose it here. So I had to keep this. We cleansed it up as much as we could, and then we stuck to the sound of the video. But yes, when it came to, especially you see a diya shot, a lamp, a small terracotta lamp, we've used the footage, I think, 4 times across the film. And also in the credits, we've used the same, a variation of that shot. So I also wanted to bring in those sounds which we completely have forgotten in our daily lives, at least as a North Indian or a Delhi person. For me, in my childhood, I remember the sound of fireflies. And I remember being able to go drive a little out of Delhi and be able to hear these birds, these fireflies. And today, no matter where you go, you just won't get to hear them. So I wanted to bring back my own childhood memories with some of the sounds that I've tried to use in this film. In fact, my editor and I would have a big argument over this. No, he sometimes, would have issues with a certain sound which are not in the film, and then why am I wanting to superimpose them? So, of course, we'll also hear him in a while. But yes, it was a conscious decision for me because a lot of these sounds are, firstly, they're not luxury anymore because we're not seeking luxury in nature, and secondly, they're not there. And fireflies have, in fact, become an endangered species in India. And I mean, the amount of poetry, Indian painting, and literature that has been written over some of these sounds is incredible. And to imagine that we're almost on the verge of losing this species, fireflies. So I wanted to bring in the sound of fireflies, jugnus, as we call it. And I really wanted to superimpose them on the credit roll. So yes, a lot of those kind of sound has later been superimposed with a certain intentional meaning. And of course, it also has, for me personally, an embedded memory of my childhood. Even if I go to these mountains in India today, I don't see or hear these sounds. I don't see the nature that I saw 10 years ago. There's been complete deforestation. Hills have been penetrated with tunnels. There's been illegal construction. Hills have been cemented. They've been devastated beyond my imagination. And I feel so hurt that I really have stopped going to the mountains now. So, yeah. So there is a very interesting play of sound. There's no doubt about that. And perhaps I can also invite my editor, Argadeep. Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So, Tina, shall we request Argadeep to speak or share his views?
Please.
So about the sound, firstly, like what she wanted to express was a change of seasons with the rain coming in and everything. So it was not possible to use. Am I audible? I'm
Yeah.
not audible, right? I'm audible, right? Okay. So firstly, it was not possible to use the sound from the footage because the rain was not consistent. It was not possible to make the change. So we used a lot of Foley sounds for that, of the rain and everything to create the mood and create the seasons. And yeah, as she told about some cases where, like, for example, the puja happening during the Diwali, there we had to use the real sound because it was not possible to use Foley sounds. And uh, like, I like to argue about the sound design with the director. It's like a thing I do because I also get to know that why she's so sure of it. Like, what are the beliefs to that she wants that particular sound. So then I get it, obviously. And then I also introduced wind chimes, if you hear, during the still shots where we are introducing the house in a way. So we didn't have any sound there to fill, and I didn't want it to be empty. I wanted to be an as she wanted because the whole film has a vibe of nostalgia. You see, the film is about nostalgia in a lot of ways. So the wind chimes are also something that she also told me that her house used to have wind chimes, and we didn't have shots of wind because like it used to have like a long time ago before she shot the film. So I introduced those sounds, the sounds that came from her memories to express that what the place used to maybe sound like. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very important. There were certain sounds which were just completely embedded in my memory. Yeah. And we didn't have actual recordings of those.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Are there any questions or comments? Because I actually have another question for you, Kanika. I like very much when you use this term nature as luxury. This is really what I like when I listen to you. And I want to ask you if nature has been recognized as a source like of well-being of people, of health. Do people travel to some rural areas to experience what they had experienced in their childhood? I'm just trying to think about, this nostalgia that you were also talking about, and that is a big part of your film. So do people have this, do they feel these feelings of, that they want to experience again the nature, and for that purpose, they travel to some rural areas or?
Yeah, I think I'm sure there would be some people, but unfortunately, the bigger trend, at least for North India or the people here in Delhi, I would say, is to go to the mountains in India, the northern mountain, that is the Himalayas. You would go there in your summers. Summer, as I told you, is an extremely difficult time in the sense it gets very, very hot. So the idea is that there are Indian families and Indian Delhi people or North Indian families. They want to go out and travel to the mountains in summers where also the kids would have a vacation and the kids can go and enjoy a different space and not such extreme heat. But I think yes, a lot of people would cherish the nature, but the question for me is, do we respect it? I'm not even going to say you or they or me. I think we all. We go to different spaces, but I think it's equally important for us to understand that if we are going in a space which is more forested than the place we come from, then we have to respect what we are going to. And we have to at least try that we do not make that next space the same as the space we are coming from. Because today we have that space. And after 50 years, perhaps we would not have that space. It would become the space that we are coming from. And then what is the difference? What is the change that we are making? If we want to just take everything from nature, I think it's not going to work. We also have to understand that we must contribute and give back. And if I go, for instance, if I go to the mountains and I keep littering and using plastic and not conform to certain ecologically friendly practices, then I don't think I deserve that nature. I think that is the issue which is to be addressed. People always travel in India. We are all very fond of traveling, but ecological practices don't exist. I think that is where the problem starts jumping in.
So you're talking about the personal responsibility, right?
Yes, I think it will have to be personal because, like, I think change cannot come from the government. I said that before in the last lecture also, that it's very difficult to expect the government to ban suddenly all of this. I think in northeast of India, there are certain states which have banned plastic packaged drinking water bottles. But that unfortunately has not happened in the rest of the country, India at least, I can say. And what do you do the moment you go to any other city or space? We all drink packaged plastic bottles of water. And where are they going to land up? It's impossible to recycle, I think, even 1% of it. So I think wherever we are traveling, and not, I mean, there are very, very few people in India, less than 1%, who want to consider such practices. So I think that is a much bigger issue. The problem is not with the whole idea of traveling, but the problem is that we do not understand how and what responsibilities do we have towards the space or towards the community that we are visiting. We are, after all, tourists. We're going to come back. So I think, yeah.
No, sorry. Yeah,
No.
your film will help with raising awareness about this and open up, many discussions around this topic, so that you will be able to, look for the alternatives and for more sustainable practices, let's say. There is another comment. We have become more alien to our nature, Manas says, which is true, of course.
Yeah, I think which is why it was my conscious attempt in the film to not directly say that, okay, there is deforestation or there is devastation, but to just gently introduce the pleasures of just seeing a tree change its color throughout a year. And there's so much magic within that one plant, one flower, one tree, one little fragrance that we can sense in spring. And that same fragrance changes, the same flower changes its color, the leaves change their colors throughout the year. I think if we can learn to appreciate that, then I think that's where true luxury lies. That's how we have to develop our sensitivity to be able to notice these changes and the nature around us.
Yeah, I see another question in the chat. It's by Michael Lee. Michael, do you want to speak yourself so that I don't read your question?
Hi, Kanika, I'm very sorry I missed about half of your talk because I was in another meeting. But we were talking about a little bit about the sounds and so forth in your film, and the film that you kind of previewed last time. It really struck me kind of just through the visuality and the noise. It really triggered other senses like smells, and it just put me into, I remember, a very humid tropical environment. Do you consciously work with certain senses to try to trigger other senses that's not usually conveyed through film? And that was one question. And another question is, are there many religious or perhaps other influential people in India that are tying religious views with environmental sustainability?
Yeah, I think both your questions are extremely relevant. And yes, I do definitely try and touch upon this idea of smell. So also when I introduce the film, I want to talk about the fragrance of the rain, the fragrance that the soil gives us when the first drop of rain touches the Indian soil after this scorching heat, the terrible summer. So yes, I have very consciously tried to therefore keep it very subtle and yet keep it to the changes that my garden witnesses in this last 1 year of its existence. So yes, that has been a very conscious attempt. And then to let the sound of birds and the jugnus, as we call them, let that just overtake you. Or for matter, the lamp, the flickering of the lamp. A very subtle flickering of it changes the colors from summer to winter to spring. So I call it in spring. It was in spring, in the sense that the first brick of breaking the house was broken in spring. I think that is when the garden is to its fullest. Everybody's celebrating. The trees are more green and the flowers are blooming like never before. Which is why I say that are they celebrating their own death? So I've really tried to introduce nature in that subtle way of what it can do to the human mind, which we definitely are moving very, very far away from. And it's very unfortunate that there are very few religious movements in India which talk about ecological concerns. It's extremely unfortunate because I think religion can really influence people, especially in India. And we have a lot of these religious minded people, but none of them, and they have a lot of followership in India. Some of them might touch upon the subject of nature, but none of them have been able to consciously introduce ecological practices successfully. It has not happened. And even for them, or when they have a certain ritual within their circles, they all use plastic, cement, and they themselves have not subscribed to these ecologically friendly practices within the spaces that they are constructing, within the material that they are using and promoting. They have themselves not subscribed to it. Simply talking about river Ganga or Yamuna and keeping it clean will not solve the problem. So I think that's very hypocritical and superficial if we just speak of it like that. Unless we consciously try and do something about it, it cannot happen. And yes, the religious groups in India have really not touched upon this.
Do you think it's possible to start opening up a dialogue, or do you think it's more complicated in terms of politics, for instance?
Yes, I think it is very complicated because at the political level, there are people who want the politicians, who want a certain kind of leadership to come up and talk about it. But then the Indian political mindset has been extremely hypocritical, if nothing else about it. I mean, the moment we have some project which compromises on ecology in a certain way, we always can get our green tribunal clearances and we can pass our plans and we can do anything we like. So it's really been on the surface level of it, be it political or religious. And yes, I think, which is why I say the change has to come from people, because if the people do not put enough pressure, no government leader, no politician, or no religious body or religious leader will take it up. If they understand that a majority of the people are interested and will have an impact, if we do not talk about it or if we ignore it, then they'll be forced to take note. But that has not happened. So the number of people who are thinking about it, who care about it, or who feel it is something worth taking note of are small, which is problematic.
Thank you.
Yes, that's was asking you before about the civil society and the role of different movements. Manas, do you want to speak, please?
Okay, so it is very interesting to know the point of view. So, do you think that it's the old ways and the new ways which are amalgamating in a very chaotic way, which is sort of throwing off the, or rather, dividing us of the consciousness that we need to be more environment conscious around us and looking from a house perspective. So do you think that it's not yet settled within the context of India, or you see that the problems like education or exposure or the mindset of colonialism or the after effects of all the independence that we got, so we are sort of we have lost our path in that way? Do you feel so?
Yeah, I think what is happening is, yes, there is the whole idea of colonialism. We ourselves are very colonial. A lot of us are very colonial. So yes, when we are looking at, like I said, luxury or reconstruction or modernization, we are blindly following this whole idea of security glass, low roof, air conditioning, a certain idea of luxury. And yes, therefore, we are moving away from a lot of traditional building material. But an amalgamation is definitely possible, and there are some architects who are trying to blend elements of both these things. So, for example, I think there is an architect or somebody working in Kolhapur called Rahul Deshpande. He has made a YouTube video of a house he has built, which is made out of completely local material, of terracotta, completely. He has created the tiles of the roof using terracotta, and he has built the house. And he does not use the refrigeration, so he has come up with an alternative for that. And in fact, or not even 200 years ago, most of people in India used that sort of techniques for refrigeration. But then, of course, he has developed it in a certain way to be able to suit our present day needs. So it is definitely possible with the intervention of people to be able to find that balance. It's not simply about forgetting that we have a modern world, and it's not about going quote unquote back to the traditional, but then we definitely have to harness the knowledge of the traditional systems and then move ahead with them. We also have to understand that the traditional knowledge system is a living tradition in itself. It cannot simply be something which is in a cocoon and which is simply dead, or we cannot simply pick it up and again superimpose it on ourselves today, but then we can again make it a living organism and we can grow with it.
So
and it is
we are the living culture of
yes, we are the living culture the moment we are willing to understand that we have to make an effort towards it. We have to not blindly follow a certain kind of culture, the capitalist culture that we are being fed with. The moment we try and take note of these patterns of capitalism and try and harness certain traditional knowledge system and grow with them, along with them, I think that is the way.
I always wonder how much perspective of museum and how filmmaking actually exposes us to our flaws constantly, and it keeps surprising us again and again. I think this is a great medium to educate ourselves and to become more awakened around the issue. Thank you for the nice video that you showed.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I think no doubt the camera is an extremely powerful medium. Yeah. And I think the best way to begin working towards an ecologically better lifestyle is to go local, to try and avoid plastic packaging, to try and avoid cosmetics, chemicals filled in plastic bottles. I think that is the best way of putting it. Yeah.
I think we are slowly coming to an end of today's conversation. So this is your last chance to ask a question or share your comment, your idea maybe. Is there anyone? Let me just check. Kanika, do you want to add anything maybe? Did we cover everything or?
I think so. Argadi, would you like to speak anything else? Share your views on the film, or is there anything that you'd like to say?
I just would like to say that I really enjoyed it, and that as I already mentioned at the beginning, it speaks on so many levels and really I suggest that you watch it again, because every time I watch it, I see another, another meaning in it, another message that I want to speak about with you, Kanika. That's why we had so many discussions already. So I suggest that you use that link. I mean, we will leave this link available for you to watch the film again for, let's say, one day, Kanika. I think this is
Yeah, for a single day, maybe for the next 24 hours or so, the film is open for viewing.
Yes, exactly.
After which the film will be removed.
Yes, so I would really like to invite you to have a second look, to watch it again. And for now, I would like to thank you all for joining us and for contributing so much. Kanika, also thank you for all your thoughts, for all your ideas. And I just wish you a lovely day. And this is all for today.
Thank you so much. I again would really like to thank Tina especially and the museum for hosting this film. I went through a lot of problems during the making of this film and during the edit in order to find an editor also. Luckily, I found Argadeep, so I'm very happy he agreed on editing the film. So I also have to really thank Argadeep for it. Argadeep, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, thank you. I think my camera is not working. Yeah, it's working. Yeah, thank you everyone for watching the film. Hopefully you'll watch it again and again and get more from it. And yeah, thank you, Tina, for showing the film. Hopefully this film will also be screened in a hall. And we'll also be sending it to film festivals. So yeah, thank you everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, Kanika, when you come, hopefully in next month, no, this month actually, because it's June already, we will also screen it here in the Slovene Ethnographic Museum for people who will be able to join us here in person. So
that would be wonderful.
Yes.
I really look forward to it.
Yes, me too. So thank you again, and enjoy the film, and see you soon, hopefully.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.